Hello everyone, this is update for December 18, 2024, day 1029, end of the date update, also catch up for December 17 and 16. As always, I'm gonna have, well, not always, but as typically I do, I will go over macroeconomic situation, general updates, and then I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield. So first, I'm going to start with the UK, where there's some new data. Most importantly is manufacturing PMI and service PMI. So as you can see, manufacturing is dying in the UK, which is part of all of this wrong policies that are being implemented uh, by um, by both actually sides of the government. In some ways, you can argue there is not a huge difference between the two parties, and so both parties continue pursuing policies that are destructive to economic freedom. I would say that's probably the best description of it, and lack of economic freedom always hits manufacturing first and leads to destruction of it. And obviously, as I always mention, it's related to the war on conventional energy. So as you can see, the deaths of manufacturing is accelerating in the UK. What saves the day is a service part of economy, which is growing a little bit, not at huge pace, but still uh, you know it's as I say, it growing. So since UK is more heavy towards service, so the net result is still going to be sort of a little bit above the water, which means it's still growing a little bit because everything above 50 is growth, everything below 50 is decline. Now, the other part that sort of helps to kind of paint some picture about the UK is that CPI is starting to pick up. So you can see both core CPI and just regular CPI. And regular CPI means things like food, energy, and so on, which are obviously are super important. And core, they remove this what is called volatile, but I would say essential part. So in some ways, it's specific view on inflation, and in some ways it's helpful, but it's using that is completely misleading because what most people experience is CPI, even that metric is completely flawed. So there is no question that it underestimates inflation. It's not what average person feels on the street, but that's what's being used by the government. But going back to this whole situation is pick up in inflation, which is obviously a very negative sign, and death of manufacturing. That's sort of essence what's going on in the UK. That doesn't mean that things. That means that things are not likely to get better there anytime, and that will continue political crisis in the UK, where the current party has declining ratings. The problem is, though, that the other parties doesn't have any credible solution to this problem because they essentially more or less continuing the same policy of basically war on conventional energy and generally mm, overregulating overregulating economy unnecessary. Sometimes it might be helpful, but in most cases it is not. Now let's move to the EU, where things pretty say ugly. The only reason I wanted to mention it because I even stopped showing EU because things more or less the same. So manufacturing in I would say close to depression level, and actually what is more interesting that manufacturing in France are really at very low levels of extremely negative situation there. Germany is also not doing that great. EU is obviously negative as well because these two economies are important parts, are essentially core. Plus, Italy is also not doing great. not as bad as Germany and France, but still not doing great. So you have generally the same trend, the same theme that we've seen with the UK and actually in US is death of manufacturing. Now let's move to actually China, where things are moving along. China has a huge real estate problem and generally debt problem, which is also a lot of debt there is sitting on local municipalities and also on obviously real estate developers, which are tightly interconnected with the local municipalities. In some ways, you can kind of say it's a one thing, one kind of corrupt creature of the Chinese government, but that's a product of how things are there. The situation with housing is with real estate prices is not improving significantly. Maybe we're seeing slowdown in decline. As you can see, it's minus 5.7 versus used to be negative 5.9. It's still, basically real estate bubble deflating in China. It continues to deflate. And really, what that means that a lot of capital is going to get destroyed, and that really means that banking system is effectively impaired in terms of ability to provide loans to the private sector and even to the government. Doesn't matter really. So banking system really becomes only just a payment system effectively in this situation. And if things really go out of control, then even payment system gets broken down. But at the same time, having said all of this sort of negative stuff, China is still managing to control this deflation of real estate bubble. So in some ways, I would say it's surprisingly a controlled demolition. And I think the secret for that is actually Chinese experts, because the country switched to its old model that allowed it to accumulate wealth, which means export growth, generating wealth through export, and obviously manufacturing is the key component there. So that, as I mentioned in prior videos, and we can even see here, exports up, imports down. That's excellent. So you basically you having capital destroyed inside of China in real estate. In some ways, it's actually already destroyed. It's just basically it's revealed that it's being destroyed. So because most economic actors in China were sort of operating on the assumption it's still there, or I'd say even government, but it's being destroyed by all of this, by housing bubble, and now just being that actually destruction is being revealed to majority. But that is being offset by this positive trade balance, which essentially means newly generated capital. So as long as this export engine works, it will basically cushion deflation of real estate bubble. And in some ways, if I would say, if I would think about just strategically about Chinese government, they may want to let this real estate bubble to sort of deflate in semi-orderly fashion, and maybe that actually is one of the reasons that China is not attacking Taiwan, because if you don't have your house in order, going into war is bad idea, generally speaking. So because there was quite a big of expectation that China will attack Taiwan in 2022 or early 2023, and that did not materialize. And I think part of the reason is this economic situation where essentially the Chinese government cannot make drastic moves, because then this controlled demolition can go into completely uncontrolled situation that will just basically generate a tremendous crash and tremendous destruction. So in some ways, basically, what China and obviously Chinese government and leadership is doing, they just they need time. They're buying time, and time sort of heals this result of this housing bubble, because time brings new capital that helps to basically patch the holes created by the deflating bubble. So that's essentially, I think, what's going on there. Then if you look at fixed asset investment, so basically it's investment in manufacturing capacity, it's not doing terribly great. So it's very clear that Chinese private businesses are not terribly optimistic, probably in terms of even exports. And then industrial production is, I would say, more or less stable. It's not going up, not down, but it's good enough for China, I would say. And then retail sales, they sort of gravitating to sort of more normal situation, because the prior period was just some kind of blip. I don't have explanation, but it's clearly was outlier. And then the employment remains more or less okay. So the situation overall in China so far is stable. And as I stated before, most likely the Chinese government want to kind of move this course to allow to this real estate bubble to deflate. And that deflation started, if I recall, somewhere in the fall of 2021. So that's been going on for a while already. Now let's switch to the US. And there's just a couple data points. One is manufacturing is dying in the US, which is no surprise. I mentioned this many times before. And it actually, this death is somewhat accelerating, as you can see. That is offset by the service part of the economy, which is overwhelming majority of the US economy. So you have still positive situation in the US, and really this kind of tells us, this positive service PMI, that the labor market is probably going to be moving along. It's not gonna sort of disintegrate in the US. And for those who haven't watched prior videos, the essence of the US labor market is that there's almost no hiring, but there's no firing. So basically what this means, if you lost job, it's really hard to find a new job. But but there's very little sort of firing going on. So you kind of like, if basically your chances of keeping a job pretty high. And it's essentially a situation of relatively few unlucky people who kind of having, I would say, relatively difficult time there. But overall, I would just say US is just moving along. And as a topic I want to discuss is actually US central bank, which reduced interest rates to 4.25. So the range is 4.25 to 4.5. And I forgot to mention the inflation. As you can see, it's not going down for sure. It's not as decisively going up as in UK, but this CPI is slightly up. So what this really tells is that US central bank is not concerned as much about inflation as actually keeping sort of labor market alive, and so it doesn't disintegrate. That's one important part. And then reducing interest rates so that financial service sector, which also means not just purely banks, but the real estate essentially in the US does not collapse. And so because there's a lot of problems in commercial real estate in the US. That's in some ways, if situation were different, it could be repeat of 2008. Except the central bank is acting very differently in the US now, relatively 2007-8, and so that's part of it is reducing interest rates, because that allows this the real estate debt to be refinanced at sort of somewhat lower rates than otherwise would be. Because if the rates remain high, there will be a lot of bankruptcies essentially in that part of the economy in the US, and that can obviously trigger similar situation to 2008, and so obviously US central bank does not want that to be happening. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that we probably just see what's the true interest, or what's a true who basically central banks protects, and it's really just the financial sector, and obviously labor market, because labor market that's in good shape ensures that banks are getting paid on the loans that they provided to consumers. So in some ways, and then inflation is really, I would say, a plug in that equation, as long as it doesn't get really out of control. And so this is apparently the sort of modus operandi of U.S. central bank, and I would say probably most of the central banks, despite the fact that there is always statements that central bank really concerned or the primary objective is controlling inflation. That's actually not true, and technically in US actually it's the actually objective is to control inflation and keep employment high. So that's like a dual mandate that the US central bank has. But reality is that inflation is not critical as long as it doesn't get to, let's say, above 5, 6, 7 and above percent. Now let's switch to situation around Ukraine, and I want to mention a little bit about this Russian general who was killed by Ukrainian Secret Service, or whatever it's called, KGB, basically Ukrainian equivalent of KGB. And this person actually was sort of essentially responsible for scientific / engineering part of the war, and the specific sort of sides of the science he was sort of representing there is chemistry, biology, and physics. So that's, I would say, probably everyone realizes that's really important and crucial part. I think that murder was a mistake, because state terrorism doesn't really work in the long run. I think it's going to backfire. It wasn't right decision. It's more of a sign of weakness rather than sign of strength or anything else. And again, it's most likely being done for propaganda purposes inside of Ukraine, and just it will provoke some kind of reaction from Russia, obviously, because Russia will probably need to save face and generally need to kind of create an impression, at least, that senior political and senior military ruling class is relatively safe. And actually it's not true and never true, but it's more of people's beliefs, and if senior level commanders not feeling safe, that doesn't really help morale and just generally paralyzes the system. So that really kind of forces Russia to react, and we'll see what it's going to be. It's not going to be immediate because obviously they will try to find sort of areas where they can strike, and it takes time and so on. But I'm sure there will be sort of reaction, which again, in the end, it's not going to be in Ukraine's favor, because if Russia start doing the same, they probably have quite a bit of capabilities, and it just it's a road to nowhere. Let's put it this way: it's not really helping Ukraine to win the war, because the main problem is really people and motivation of people. That's where the core of Ukrainian problem. But now I'm going to switch to the walks through the front line in a clockwise fashion, and we're going to start with the situation in the Kursk region of Russia. Situation continues to get worse for Ukrainian forces. Russian troops slowly but surely squeezing this bridgehead, and it's essentially becoming a little bit sort of area around Sudzha and let's say Plekhovo. All of this part already, and I mentioned, was captured by Russian forces, and also this area Darino, and also looks like Russian troops are also advancing in this area, Cherkaske, Porechne. So essentially, soon it will be small territory around Sudzha. So it's basically again this was destined from the beginning to fail because there was no strategic idea behind this. So this is actually, in some ways, I want to draw analogy with this murder of this general, because again, it doesn't go anywhere. It's waste of resources, and it's actually distract population or citizens of Ukraine from focusing on things that can help to change the course of the war. And now let's move to the Kharkiv area. Things here are more or less stable, no major moves by either side, and more specifically Russia, because initiative is fully in Russia's hands. Now let's move to North Lugansk section of the front line. Things here somewhat more or less stable, not perfectly. Ukrainian forces slowly losing territory everywhere, but there's no like large scale losses or Russian breakthroughs on this front line. Now let's look at the situation on the North Donbass section of the front line. The northern part is more or less quiet, not much going on here. The southern part, also the key area here is this fight for this brick factory in Chasiv Yar. It's still ongoing. Ukrainian forces managing to hold on, I would say, longer than I expected. But again, the sort of the fate is very clear, and it's gonna get lost, but probably will take longer. And obviously, Russian forces here definitely lack resources. So they still try to achieve something with very limited resources, but overall, the part of the reason why things are somewhat more stable here is because, again, Russia has fewer resources in this area. Now let's move to central Donbass section of the front line, where things really, I would say, collapsing in somewhat major way, and just want to focus on the area, the Kurakhove area. Also, then right now, Velika Novosilka is becoming problem, and also this area sort of southwest of Pokrovsk. Basically, Russian troops essentially trying to break through in a major way in the direction of Udachny here, which is going to be quite I would say, disastrous for Ukraine. But this whole area, starting from South Pokrovsk to Velika Novosilka, is on the verge of really, I would say, catastrophic collapse, and it's definitely going in that direction. By the way, Ukrainian president changed the commander of this area, so there is actually, so the prior commander was dismissed, uh, and there is a new one, General Trnavsky. I wouldn't say there's anything special about him. I think it's just probably not as bad as the prior one, because the prior one was, I would say, as we can see, completely incompetent. So, but again, this is not about, general is somewhat part of the story, but really it's motivation of the troops, which is, I would say, very low on the Ukrainian side. And let's actually look at the specific situation, more sort of specific details. And so Russian troops are mostly, as I stated, advancing into this northwestern direction towards the village Udachne, and I would say Kotlin. So essentially, they want to cut off this road, which is already non sort of functioning. So there's no ability to really use it, and really it's not about the road. It's just because I just mentioned because it's on the map, but really it's getting to this village Udachne, which then has this coking coal mine here, and so that really would put a huge blow into Ukrainian economy once Russian troops, even if they close in this Udachne area, this is already going to be enough to stop production of coking coal, which is basically, without that you cannot make steel. So, and then buying steel from abroad makes Ukrainian steel non-competitive on the international market. So this really means, if not collapse, clear, close to collapse of Ukrainian steel industry. And then there's also sort of like a, say, breakthrough in the direction of Uspенivka here, and then things also starting to develop in very negative way around Novolenivka, which is essentially semi encircled and is in process of being lost by Ukrainian forces. So probably, by next video it's going to get lost a little bit more than that, but essentially Russian troops kind of broke through north of it and south of it, and advancing. And so this is, again, the situation here is extremely dangerous, and I'll keep saying this, but eventually this may lead to really big operational advances by Russian troops. And this is how it looked on December 11th. So as you can see, and I mentioned that Ukrainian forces did counterattack, but as you can see, all of these counterattacks are in the not even long run, but ultimately not successful. The Ukrainian forces managed to sort of push a little bit Russian troops, but then eventually this territory is lost again. And this again goes back to this whole problem with motivation, the whole problem with organizational problems in Ukrainian army, and specifically at the top level command. Now I moved a little bit south to Kurakhove area. So Kurakhove is near this actually artificial lake, to cool down this power station that's here. So all Ukrainian forces have in their hands is this power station, which is mentioned before, excellent defensive position. But at this point, it's very clear it's going to get lost without really major fight, because this is essentially future pocket that's being created here, and Russian troops are advancing. So they captured Zelenivka, and they advancing in direction basically towards Constantinople and towards Ulakli from Zelenivka, and also they basically there is a fighting going on for this village Dachny, and they are advancing to, there is fighting for Shevchenko. So essentially, this whole area is essentially lost at this point. There's another problem for Ukraine is Russian troops managed to capture this Novy Kamar again. So for those who haven't seen, so the situation was developing the following way. Russian troops captured Novy Kamar, then Ukrainian forces counterattacked, and then Russian troops attacked again, and so Novy Kamar is again lost and is again in Russian hands. So what this really means that Velika Novosilka essentially going to be lost in relatively quick time, and that's another huge sort of cornerstone in Ukrainian defenses in this area. So this really means much faster moves of Russian troops forward. So again, that's why I mentioned that all this area from Pokrovsk south to Velika Novosilka is really on the verge of large-scale collapse, so that will allow Russian troops to do operational moves, because everything so far was still somewhat tactical, but the collapse in major way will allow Russian troops to really advance much faster and much deeper. This is where it used to be on December 15, as you can see. Let's say not huge changes here. The only big problem is that Zelenivka is completely captured, and Russian troops actually already advancing towards northwest of it and north of it. Now let's switch to the situation on Zaporizhya front line, where things are quiet, not much going on here. And then the last part is situation along the Dnipro river, where things are also quiet, not much going on here. That's all for the day. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.